Representative Dave Miller represents House District 55. He's the longest serving member of the House of Representatives and now will become the House Majority Leader. Representative Miller, thank you for joining us on this Capital Outlook profile.
Craig, thanks for the invitation.
You're sure welcome. You've been in Wyoming quite a while, Dave. Why did you get interested in politics?
Well, you know, it goes back to 99, 2000. Some friends at the Wyoming Geological Survey and I wrote a paper together, and guess what it was on? The current topic, economic diversification. And so we have a paper on economic diversification through mineral resources. So we did that paper. We looked at all these mineral resources scattered around the state that aren't being mined, and they're not oil and gas or coal, they're other commodities besides what we traditionally get revenue from. So gold, silver, rare earth minerals, things like that. And so we have a whole list of well over a dozen different projects that aren't being developed or mined. And I decided to mine one of them out on paper. I know roughly the size of it. I mined it out on paper over 30 years to figure out the tax revenue that it would generate. And it would generate something on the order of $250 million in taxes over that 30-year period. And then at that time, back in 99 and 2000, we were talking about diversifying away from minerals, just like we are right now. It's deja vu all over again. And so I took a high-tech business. I just made one up, a disc manufacturer, same amount of jobs, same time period. How much taxes would that high-tech business generate over the same time period? And what it turned out to be was a 57-to-1 ratio. The mineral projects generated 57 times the amount of taxes as the high-tech businesses. And that's because here in Wyoming, we tax minerals. We really don't tax the other industries. A little bit of property taxes here and there, but even the mineral industry pays the majority of the property taxes, roughly 2/3.
Your 57-to-1 ratio still current today?
It's pretty accurate. I haven't made that calculation in 15 years, but my guess is still going to be in that same range. I calculated that 57-to-1 ratio, and I took it then to Senator Peck, who was chair of Revenue Committee at the time. And I asked Bob to look at my calculations. I said, Bob, is this right? And is it that much of a huge difference? And he looked at it and said, yeah, it is. You know, there's nothing wrong with your numbers. That's exactly the way, that's exactly who we tax here in Wyoming. And then that's when he leans back in his chair, and I've known new Senator Peck for pretty much ever since we moved to Riverton back in the late 70s. And he says, Dave, you reached that point in your career, 20 years with Pathfinder and Utah International, one of the largest mining companies in the U.S. That's when Senator Bebout, or House Representative Bebout, also stepped down. And he said, you should run for the House. He said, Dave, are you going to complain about it or try to do something about it? So I didn't realize how frustrating an experience it would be because things move slow, but I threw my hat in the ring, and surprisingly, I'm still there.
What's changed in the House since you started in 2001 until today, aside from the leadership role that you're about to serve?
Well, the huge change is when I entered the House back in 2001, before the session started, we were looking at a $70 million shortfall. By the time the session started, we were looking at a $100 million surplus. And then almost for the next 10 years, we had surpluses every year, sometimes over $1 billion. And so we managed to save some of that money. We managed to distribute a lot of that money around the state, you know, K through 12, the community colleges, the university, cities, towns, and counties, everyone benefited to some extent. And we did build up our savings coffers 4 times like we're approaching right now.
Are you comfortable, or more general, is the philosophy of how we're starting to spend our savings something that is agreeable to you?
It's not conservative enough. We spent a lot in this last biennium of our savings, not just from what they call the LISRA account, but from other accounts where we had stashed money in. Some of them are down to zero now. And so we've spent a large percentage of that already, what we built up. So now I think the main account that has roughly $1.5 billion in it remaining, instead of just planning for it lasting 3 or 4 years, I think we need to plan on it lasting 10 years. Because you were here, you were quite a bit younger back in the 80s, but when the last mineral price depression came with oil, gas, and coal, that lasted a good 15 years. Is this one going to last 15 years? I don't know. I hope not, but it very well could.
Just like back in those times, there's now talk of revenue. The governor has talked about revenue. Others have talked about revenue as well. Representative Miller, as you are looking in this session, we're filming this before the session begins. What are your thoughts on enhancing revenue, whether it's time to enhance revenue for the state of Wyoming?
Revenue enhancements, right now, there's very little, if any, that I can support. If we're going to allow big wind turbine, wind power projects in Wyoming, we might look at increasing that tax.
Are you worried that that would defer their development?
I don't think so, because the wind speaks for itself. The area where they're wanting to put it is one of the best areas in the country for wind development. Going from $1 a megawatt hour to $2 or $3 is not going to make or break that project. What's more important is what the feds do on the national level, whether they get the tax credits or not. If they don't get the tax credits, we could give them $1 a kilowatt hour and they still wouldn't build it.
Internet sales tax, maybe?
You know, that's been going on a long time. I remember Senator Peck working on this and us having discussions on this. It's not fair for the brick and mortar businesses here in our community to have to charge the sales tax, yet you can get online and order the exact same thing, maybe even at a lesser price, and you don't have to pay sales tax. That's just a fundamental unfairness. Now, to get people to support internet sales taxes, that's going to be a tough one, because there's going to be a lot of people that are opposed to that. I will not support a state income tax, period. You know, it's, income taxes on non-governmental organizations might be an interesting tax, because they don't even pay property taxes in some instances, yet we have to educate their kids to the tune of roughly $18,000 per child. So there's got to be ways to enhance the revenue stream, especially from the people that don't pay now. So maybe that's something that needs to be looked at. And again, I've said this for ever since I've been down there, is call centers and distribution warehouses, that's a recipe for bankruptcy, because we then have to educate the children of those particular businesses. And I'm all for economic diversification, don't get me wrong, but no one's talking about where the tax revenue comes to support these businesses. They're not paying their full load. That's clear. So what do we do about it? I'm not for sure. I haven't gone down that road yet, because I'm one that believes that minerals can pay the bills in perpetuity, but you have to allow access to the minerals in order to do that. So until Wyoming becomes one big park, I'm still going to fight for continued development of our mineral resources and the tax base that they generate for our citizens.
What will be the legacy of a House Majority Leader Dave Miller's service in this capacity?
I think, again, and again, you know my history a little bit, the public lands issue is a big issue. It's a fairness issue. Why did all the states east of Wyoming get their public lands distributed to the state, and the states west of Wyoming didn't? You know, it's because they were still available when FLIPMA rolled around in 1976. Prior to FLIPMA in 1976, they were managed for multiple use, and Wyoming did just fine with that policy. Since 1976, it's gradually eroded more and more the access to the public lands. And again, this is one of my standard speeches on the floor. When there's a particular bill out there that's going to make it more difficult for mineral development in Wyoming, I remind my partners in the House that understand what this bill is doing. It's going to make mineral production more difficult. It's going to, it's going to be more of a tourist-oriented state. And if that's what we want, then that's fine. Just understand what you're voting for. And I'm not convinced that a lot of the people in Wyoming just don't want us to become a destination state, to where we have all these wide open spaces, we have the wildlife, and we really don't have any mineral production. We have a little bit of ag that pays very little in the big scheme of things, but it provides for the proper aesthetics that we love here in Wyoming. So is that what Wyoming's going to be? If that's where Wyoming's going to be in 20 or 30 years, that's fine. just understand what we're doing, that we won't have the mineral industry to carry the burden of government services and educating our kids and running our community colleges and running our university. You know, you're going to have to pay for it. And at that time, I think the state will be a lot smaller because we can't support this size government with non-mineral taxation.